My niece fired me on her first day as CEO, ignoring the acquisition deal I spent 10 years building. She thought she won, but she triggered a hidden clause that cost the family business $500 million. The air in the boardroom smelled of stale coffee and high-stakes anxiety. It was 4:15 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, the kind of gray, rainy afternoon where the skyline of the city looks like it's been sketched in charcoal. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, my hand resting on document that was thicker than a dictionary and worth considerably more. Across from me sat Harrison Cole, the lead negotiator for Titan Global. Harrison was a man who didn't smile. He merely adjusted his facial muscles to indicate a transaction was complete. He was wearing a navy suit that likely cost more than the first car I ever bought. "The terms are acceptable, Thomas," Harrison said, his voice dry as dust. $6 billion for the acquisition of Right Tech, contingent on the final regulatory sweep and the retention of core leadership during transition phase. Titan Global is happy to have you. I felt a knot loosen in my chest. 15 years. That's how long it had been since I sketched the initial schematic for our quantum encryption chip on a napkin in a diner. Now, it was the industry standard. "We're happy to be part of the Titan family, Harrison," I replied, clicking my pen on a silver Parker jotter I'd had since college and signing the final page. My older brother Robert sat to my right. As the chairman and majority shareholder, this was technically his victory, but everyone in the room knew who had built the engine that drove this car. Robert was sweating, his eyes darting around the room with a nervous energy that I attributed to the sheer magnitude of the wealth we were about to unlock. "It's a great day, Thomas," Robert murmured, though he wouldn't look me in the eye. "A great day for the family." "It is," I agreed, closing the leather binder. "Mom and Dad would have been proud." The door to the boardroom swung open. It wasn't the caterers with the champagne. It was Chloe, Robert's 26-year-old daughter, my niece. Chloe had joined the company 6 months ago, fresh out of an MBA program that she had barely scraped through. She walked in with the unearned confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. Her heels clicked aggressively against the hardwood floor, a staccato rhythm that silenced the room. "Are we done here?" Chloe asked, not looking at me, but staring directly at the signed contract in the center of the table. "Just finished, Chloe," I said, offering a polite smile. "We're celebrating?" "Good," she said, finally turning her gaze to me. Her eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth I remembered from when she was a child. "Because we need to discuss the restructuring immediately." I frowned. "Restructuring? Chloe, the ink isn't even dry. We have a transition plan with Titan. Nothing changes for at least 12 months. Harrison Cole stood up, buttoning his jacket. "I leave the internal politics to you gentlemen and lady. Thomas, I'll see you at the integration meeting on Monday. Remember, Titan is buying the brain trust. That means you." "I'll be there," I promised. Harrison left, his team trailing behind him like a silent school of sharks. The room suddenly felt very small. "What was that about, Chloe?" I asked, turning to the woman. "You don't interrupt a $6 billion closing to talk about org charts." Chloe smirked, leaning against the wall, crossing her arms. "Dad, tell him." I looked at Robert. He was wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, his face pale. "Thomas." Robert started, his voice cracking. "We, the board, met this morning before the signing. Furthermore," I asked, the temperature in the room seeming to drop 10 degrees, "and we decided that for the next phase, the Titan phase, we need a modern vision." Robert said, rushing the words out, "Chloe is going to be taking over as CEO effective tomorrow morning." I laughed. It was a reflexive, incredulous sound. "Robert, be serious. Chloe has been here 6 months. She doesn't know the difference between a qubit and a line of code. Titan expects me to lead the integration." "Titan expects a right to lead it," Chloe interjected, stepping forward. "And I'm a right, a younger, sharper one. We need to pivot away from your outdated operational models, Uncle Thomas. You built the tech, sure, but you don't know how to sell the future." "I just sold the company for $6 billion, Chloe," I said, my voice rising. "I think I know how to sell." "You sold the past," she countered. "I'm the future. Pack your things, Thomas. We'll discuss your severance package in the morning." I looked at Robert, waiting for him to correct her, to step in and be the big brother. He just stared at the table. "It's majority rule, Thomas," Robert whispered. "I'm sorry." The betrayal hit me harder than the absurdity of it. I stood up, grabbing my pen. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly. "A very expensive one." Chloe just laughed. "I think we can afford it." The next morning, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain that hadn't yet fallen. I arrived at the office at 7:45 in the morning, just as I had every day for the last 15 years. But today my keycard didn't beep. The little light on the scanner turned to harsh, rejecting red. I tried it again. Red, Mr. Wright. I turned to see Frank, the head of security. I had hired Frank 10 years ago. I knew his wife's name. I had sent a gift when his daughter graduated college. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth right now. "Frank, my card's demagnetized," I said, though I already knew that wasn't the problem. "It's not, sir," Frank said, looking at his shoes. "I have orders. You're not allowed on the premises without an escort. Your access has been revoked." I felt a cold flush of humiliation creep up my neck. "Revoked? By whom?" "CEO's orders," Frank mumbled. "Mrs. Chloe." "Fine," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my hands were trembling slightly in my pockets. "Escort me then. I need to get my personal effects." The walk to the elevator was the longest of my life. The lobby, usually a place where employees would wave or stop me to chat about a project, was deadly silent. People looked down at their phones, avoiding eye contact. They knew. In a company this size, bad news travels faster than light. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, the change was immediate. My nameplate had already been removed from the door of the corner office. In its place, a hastily printed piece of paper read, "Chloe Wright, Chief Executive of Foxtrot." I walked toward my office, but Frank gently blocked my path. "Sorry, Mr. Wright, you can't go in there. Mr. Hayes packed your things." Mr. Hayes, our general counsel, a man who was terrified of his own shadow. He was standing by the reception desk, holding a single cardboard box. He looked like he was about to vomit. "Thomas," Mr. Hayes squeaked. "This is standard procedure for a termination of this level." "Termination?" I repeated, taking the box. It was light, too light for 15 years of work. "I founded this place, Mr. Hayes." "The board voted," Mr. Hayes said, sweating. "Chloe Ms. Wright. She felt it was best to make a clean break, immediate separation." "Where is she?" I asked, looking toward the glass walls of the conference room. She was there. Chloe was sitting at the head of the table in my seat, surrounded by her strategy team, a group of 20-somethings in skinny suits who looked like they'd never soldered a circuit board in their lives. She saw me. She didn't wave. She didn't look away. She just smirked, tapped her watch, and turned back to her team. It was a dismissal, a total erasure. "I need my files, Mr. Hayes," I said, turning back to the lawyer. "My personal notes, the prototypes in my safe." "Company property," Mr. Hayes recited robotically. "Intellectual property of Wright Tech. It stays." I looked at the box in my hands, a framed photo of my wife, Chloe, ironic now, a coffee mug my daughter made in ceramics class, and a stress ball. That was it. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Hayes," I said, my voice low. "Does she know about the acquisition terms?" "Did you brief the woman?" She didn't want a briefing," Mr. Hayes stammered. "She said she knows what she's doing. She has an MBA, Thomas." "An MBA isn't a license to drive a Formula One car," I snapped. "Mr. What?" "Rice, please," Frank said softly, his hand hovering near my elbow. "Don't make me do this." I looked at Frank. I looked at the employees peering over their cubicle walls, their faces a mix of pity and fear. I realized then that fighting in the lobby wouldn't win me anything but a viral video moment. "All right, Frank," I said, straightening my coat. "Lead the way." I walked out of that building with my head high, clutching that pathetic cardboard box. As I stepped out onto the wet sidewalk, the rain finally began to fall. I stood there for a moment, looking up at the steel and glass tower I had built. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah Jenkins, my executive assistant. "She's changing the access codes to the server room. She fired the senior engineers. She says we're pivoting to blockchain. Thomas, it's a slaughterhouse in here." I stared at the text. Pivoting to blockchain. It was a buzzword salad. She was going to gut the company. But then a thought struck me. A memory of a conversation with Harrison Cole 3 weeks ago. A specific request he had made and a specific clause I had insisted on to protect the employees. I wasn't just fired. I was erased, and if I was erased, I hurried to my car. I needed to get home. I needed to check the contract. I drove home in a trance, the windshield wipers slapping out a rhythm that matched my racing heart. Thump, 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 thump. My house was quiet when I arrived. My wife, Chloe, my Chloe, the good one, was out at her volunteer job. I was grateful for the silence. I needed to think. I carried the box into my home office and dumped it on the desk. The stress ball bounced off the mahogany and rolled under the chair. I ignored it. I went straight to my personal safe in the closet. I kept copies of everything. Not digital copies on the company's server that could be wiped by a vengeful niece, but physical hard copies. I spun the dial left to 2-4, right to 10, left to 05. The heavy door swung open. There it was, the draft agreement for the Titan Global acquisition, the Bible as we called it. 300 pages of legalese defining the sale of my life's work. I grabbed the binder and threw it onto my desk, flipping the pages frantically. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from a rising cold fury. Come on, I muttered. Where is it? I remembered the negotiation. Harrison Cole was obsessed with stability. He knew that tech companies often collapse when the founders cashed out. He wanted insurance. He wanted to know that the person who understood the black box technology was going to be there to hand the keys over. I flipped past the indemnity clauses, past the patent schedules. There, page 47, section 4.3, essential personnel and leadership continuity. I scanned the paragraph, my finger tracing the lines. Paragraph 3, key man provision. It is understood and agreed that the continued employment and active leadership of Thomas Vance, the key man, as Chief Executive Officer and Project Lead, is a material condition of this agreement. The purchaser, Titan Global, is entering into this transaction in reliance upon the key man's specific knowledge, technical expertise, and operational control. I read the next sentence out loud to the empty room. In the event that the key man is terminated, demoted, or otherwise removed from his position as project lead prior to the closing date or during the only 2-month transition period without the express written consent of Titan Global, this agreement shall be immediately null and void. I sat back, the breath rushing out of me. The deal was void. The $6 billion was gone. But it was the next paragraph that made me smile. A cold, hard smile that didn't reach my eyes. Paragraph 4. Breakup fee. In the event of termination of this agreement due to a breach of the key man provision by the seller, Right Tech, the seller shall be liable to pay the purchaser a breakup fee of $500 million. $500,000. $500,000 within 5 business days to compensate for opportunity costs and market valuation adjustments. $500 million. Chloe hadn't just fired me, she hadn't just voided the deal. She had triggered a $500 million debt that the company didn't have the cash reserves to pay. We had liquidity, sure, but not that much. Not immediately. If Titan called in this debt, Right Tech would be insolvent instantly. I reached for my phone. I didn't call Robert. I didn't call the board. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 4 years. Jessica Blake, attorney at law. The sharp voice answered on the second ring. Jessica, the fixer. I had helped her when she was going through a messy divorce that almost cost her license. I had hired her to handle a personal patent dispute, and she had decimated the opposition. She owed me. Jessica, I said, it's Thomas Vance. There was a pause. Thomas, I saw the news on the ticker. Titan Global acquisition, $6 billion. Congratulations. Why are you calling me? You should be on a yacht. I'm not on a yacht, I said, staring at page 47. I was just escorted out of my building by security. My niece fired me. She what? Jessica's voice sharpened. She fired me. She what? Jessica's voice sharpened. She fired me, effective immediately. And Jessica? Yes, she didn't read the contract. Specifically the key man clause on page 47. I heard a sound on the other end of the line. It sounded like a lighter flickering followed by a long exhale. Does Titan know yet? She asked. Not yet, I said. Thomas, Jessica said, her voice dropping into a professional purr that was terrifying to behold. Do you want to negotiate a severance, or do you want to burn it down? I looked at the cardboard box. I thought of Chloe's smirk. I thought of Robert's silence. I don't want a severance, I said. I want a severance, I said. I want to enforce the contract to the letter. Meet me in my office in an hour, Jessica said. Bring the binder and bring popcorn. This is going to be fun. Jessica Blake's ex office didn't look like a law firm. It looked like a predator's observation deck. Located on the 45th floor, the walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city's financial district, the very district she terrorized for a living. I sat in a chair made of Italian leather that probably cost more than my first car. Jessica stood by the window, silhouetted against the gray afternoon light. She hadn't changed much in 4 years. Her hair was still cut in a sharp asymmetrical bob that looked like it could cut glass, and her posture was rigid, like a coiled spring. "Page 47, she said, not turning around. She was holding my binder open in her hands. "It's beautiful. Thomas. It's poetry." "I didn't think it would come to this," I said, staring at a modern art sculpture on her desk that looked vaguely like a shrapnel explosion. "I put that clause in to protect the employees, to stop Titan from gutting the staff the moment I left. I never thought my own family would be the ones to pull the trigger." Jessica turned, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She dropped the binder onto the desk with a heavy thud. "That's the thing about family businesses, Thomas. The blood makes the water murky. People think they can get away with murder because they share a last name." She leaned over the desk, her eyes gleaming with a predatory light. "That a contract doesn't care about DNA. A contract is a machine," and Chloe just stuck her hand into the gears. "So, what's the play?" I asked. Jessica walked over to her wet bar and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. She didn't offer me any. She knew I didn't drink before 5 at 00. "The play is simple," she said, taking a sip. "We notify Titan Global. We don't notify Right Tech. We don't send a warning shot to your brother. We go straight to the executioner." I hesitated. "If we tell Titan, they cancel the deal immediately. They demand the fee." "Exactly," Jessica smiled. "Titan Global is a publicly traded conglomerate. Harrison Cole has a fiduciary duty to his shareholders. If he finds out the key man has been terminated, he must void the deal to protect his investment. He has no choice, and he must demand the breakup fee." "It will bankrupt the company," I said quietly. "Robert, he'll lose everything. The house, the pension, the stock." Jessica slammed her hand down on the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Thomas, wake up. They threw you out like trash. They didn't just fire you. They erased you. Frank escorted you out. Mr. Hayes wouldn't let you take your notes. That wasn't business. That was a public execution. They wanted to humiliate you." She pulled a document from her printer tray. It was already drafted. "This is a formal notice of material breach and change of control. It informs Titan Global that Thomas Vance is no longer employed by Right Tech. Once I send this to Harrison Cole's legal team, the clock starts. 5 days for Right Tech to pay 500. She slid the paper across the desk, along with a heavy fountain pen. "Do you want to be the nice uncle who got rolled by a 26-year-old amateur? Or do you want to be the man who taught them that actions have consequences?" I looked at the paper. I thought of the red light on the security scanner. I thought of the smirk on Chloe's face. I picked up the pen. The ink flowed black and permanent. "Send it," I said. The next 48 hours were a study in agonizing silence. I stayed in my house, the curtains drawn, watching the rain streak against the windows. My wife, my Chloe, sat with me for hours, holding my hand. She didn't say, "I told you so," even though she had warned me for years that Robert was weak and his daughter was dangerous. "You did the right thing," she whispered, bringing me a cup of tea. "They broke the bond, Thomas, not you." My phone sat on the coffee table face up. I had set it to silent, but the screen kept lighting up. "Missed call, Robert Vance, 4. Missed call, Right Tech HQ, 2. Texts from Robert Thomas, where are you? We need the passwords for the server. Chloe is asking," and I ignored them all. Let them struggle. Let them realize that operational pivot was harder than it looked on a PowerPoint slide. At 2 in the afternoon on Thursday, my personal cell buzzed with a message from Sarah Jenkins, my mole inside the building. "Sarah, she's ordering new furniture for the executive suite. Herman Miller chairs for everyone. She just announced a rebranding initiative in the all-hands meeting. She's spending money we don't have yet." I shook my head. Chloe was spending the acquisition money before it had even hit the bank. She was counting chickens that were already dead. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the notification came through from Jessica. "Jessica, the courier just delivered the package to Harrison Cole's office at Titan Global. Reception signed for it at 4:28 in the afternoon. The fuse is lit. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was done. There was no taking it back. Somewhere across the city in a glass tower much taller than ours, a legal aid was opening an envelope that contained a nuclear bomb. I imagined Harrison Cole reading it. I imagined his thin lips tightening. I imagined him picking up the phone not to call me, but to call his CFO. My phone lit up again. Missed call, Robert. I stared at the screen. Robert didn't know yet. He was probably calling to ask how to reset the alarm code or find a file. He had no idea that he was standing on a trapdoor and I had just pulled the lever. Are you going to answer? My wife asked, looking up from her book. No, I said, flipping the phone face down. I'm retired. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a held breath, the calm before the storm. I went to the kitchen and started making dinner, chopping vegetables with methodical precision. I needed to keep my hands busy. Around 6 in the evening, Sarah texted, "Something is wrong. Mr. Hayes just ran out of his office looking like he saw a ghost. He's heading to Chloe's office. He's holding a fax. A fax, the old school method of legal service." Titan Global moved fast. I stopped chopping. The knife hovered over a red pepper. The first domino had fallen. While the legal missile was inbound, Vance Tech was throwing a party. Sarah sent me photos from the New Era celebration Chloe had organized in the main atrium. It was nauseating. There were balloons in the company colors, blue and silver, and a banner that read WR Vance Tech 20, the future is female. I zoomed in on the photo. There was a champagne tower. Catering staff were passing around hors d'oeuvres that looked like caviar. Chloe stood on a makeshift stage holding a microphone, wearing a white suit that made her look like a cult leader. Robert stood behind her, clapping like a trained seal, a glass of champagne in his hand. I could almost hear her speech. Something about shedding the dead weight of the past. Something about synergy and paradigms. I sat in my dark living room, the glow of the phone illuminating my face. It was tragic. They were celebrating a victory that had already been annulled. Sarah. She just announced a 10% bonus for the executive team. The engineers are rolling their eyes, but the sales team is eating it up. Enjoy it while it lasts, I muttered. Then the tone of the text changed. Sarah, 6:15 in the evening, Mr. Hayes is in the atrium. He interrupted the speech. He looks sick. Sarah, 6:17 in the evening, Chloe is yelling at him. She's trying to wave him off, but he's showing her a paper. Robert just dropped his glass. It shattered. I closed my eyes and visualized the scene. The shatter of crystal on the atrium floor. The sudden hush of the crowd. The music, probably some upbeat pop song still playing in the background while the world ended. Sarah, 6:20 in the evening, Chloe just screamed. I mean, actually screamed. Everyone is staring. Mr. Hayes is shaking his head. Robert is sitting down on the edge of the stage holding his chest. My phone began to ring. It wasn't a silent buzz this time. The vibration rattled the table. Caller ID, Chloe Vance, niece. I let it ring. Caller ID, Robert Vance, I let it ring. Caller ID, Mr. Hayes, I let it ring. Then a new number appeared, a landline. The area code was 212 New York, Titan Global. It was Harrison Cole. I picked up the phone. Hello, Harrison, I said, my voice steady. Thomas. Harrison's voice was ice cold, sharper than I'd ever heard it. I just received a disturbing notification from your counsel. Is it true? Is what true? I asked, feigning ignorance, though we both knew the game. That you are no longer the project lead. That you have been removed from the premises. It is, I said. My niece, the new CEO, decided my services were no longer required. She felt my operational model was outdated. I see, Harrison said. There was the sound of typing in the background. Did you inform them of the breakup fee results? I assume the CEO read the contract she signed, Harrison. Was I wrong to assume that? A long pause. No, Harrison said. You weren't. But this changes things drastically. I imagine it does. I'm initiating the clawback procedures, Thomas, and the penalty enforcement. We are freezing the escrow account immediately. You have to do what you have to do, Harrison. Indeed. I suspect your phone is about to be very busy. Goodbye, Thomas. The line clicked dead. I looked at the photo of the party again, the champagne tower, the banner. The ship hadn't just hit an iceberg. The iceberg had been there the whole time. Chloe had just steered the ship directly into it at full speed, laughing all the way. My phone rang again. It was Robert. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I swiped right. Hello, Robert, I said. Thomas. He screamed, his voice hysterical, breathless. Thomas, what did you do? What did you do to us? I didn't do anything, Robert, I said calmly. I'm just sitting at home, retired like you wanted. The fee, the $500 million, Titan just faxed a demand letter. They say the deal is void. They want the money in 5 days. Read page 47, Robert, I said. Paragraph 3. Thomas, you have to fix this. Call them. Tell them you're still here. We can hire you back right now. You can have your office back. I looked at the empty cardboard box on my desk. Sorry, Robert, I said. I'm afraid my calendar is full. I hung up. The next morning, the rain had stopped, replaced by a humid, oppressive gray mist that clung to the windows. At 10:30 in the morning, a courier truck pulled into my driveway. It wasn't the usual postman, it was a private process server. I signed for the envelope. It was thick, heavy, and stamped with the Titan Global insignia. It was a courtesy copy of the document that had landed on Robert's desk the previous evening. I took it into the kitchen and poured a cup of black coffee. My wife sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a warm mug, watching me with a mixture of apprehension and pride. Is that it? She asked softly. This is it, I said. Slicing the envelope open with a knife, I pulled out the document. It was titled Notice of Material Breach and Demand for Immediate Payment. I skipped the legal preamble and went straight to the bold text in the center of the second page. Pursuant to Article 4, Section 4.3 of the Acquisition Agreement, the removal of Mr. Thomas Vance constitutes a keyman event. Titan Global hereby exercises its right to terminate the agreement effective immediately. And then, the number that changed everything. Demand is hereby made for the payment of the breakup fee in the amount of $500,000 and $500,000 and 500 billion USD payable via wire transfer within 5500 million USD, doubly payable via wire transfer within 5 pipe minutes business days. Failure to remit payment will result in immediate litigation and asset seizure 5 days. They had 120 hours to find $500 million in liquid cash. I knew the company's financials better than anyone. We had strong revenue, valuable patents, and significant real estate holdings. But cash? We maybe had $50 million in the operating accounts. The rest was tied up in R&ID, inventory, and long-term investments. To pay this, they would have to sell assets fast. And when you sell assets in a panic, you get pennies on the dollar. My phone rang. It was Robert again. This time I answered. Hello, Robert? Thomas. His voice was a rasp, like he hadn't slept in 24 hours. We received the letter. You have to stop this. You have to call Harrison Cole and tell him it was a misunderstanding. Tell him you're on a sabbatical. Tell him you're still the lead. I can't lie to a publicly traded company, Robert, I said, taking a sip of coffee. That's securities fraud. I'm not going to prison for Chloe's mistake. She's your niece. Robert shouted, the desperation cracking his voice. She made a mistake. She's young. You're going to destroy the family legacy over a bruised ego. Legacy? I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. You let her escort me out by security, Robert. You let her erase 15 years of my life in 5 minutes. You didn't say a word. You just watched. I was outnumbered by the board, he stammered. You are the board, Robert. You own 51% of the voting stock. You could have stopped the woman. You chose not to act. Thomas, please, we can't pay this. If we don't pay by Tuesday, they'll file for insolvency. The banks will freeze our credit lines. We'll be finished. Then I suggest you start liquidating, I said. Sell the corporate jet, sell the downtown building, sell the patent portfolio if you have to act. We can't sell the patents. That's the core business. It was the core business, I corrected. Now it's just collateral. Thomas, wait. I hung up. I looked at my wife. He wants me to lie to Titan to save them. She shook her head. Don't you dare. They made their bed. I texted Jessica. Robert is panicking. He's asking me to commit fraud to cover it up.